Hi, welcome back. Thank you for joining us on this ongoing, ever-deepening journey into Source Life through the access code to the Logosophia, the code that opens up the deep field of being, which has been a quest across the planet for millennia by our great genius, pioneers, spiritual, enlightenment teachers, first philosophers through the ages. We're entering now the 26th guided meditation into the Source with the Unum science, the unified Source code. We use the word Unum for the infinite unity of being, of reality, of the Logos, of reason. And we ended our last meditation on an optimistic note, not just a kind of light optimism and wishful thinking, but scientific optimism in terms of source science. And I'd like to pick up on that in this 26th meditation as we go deeper and deeper into source to get the language of the source matrix and to see it over against what we've called out as the smotherboard, the motherboard matrix that has been holding our human family captive for millennia, and our great source pioneer teachers and geniuses in scriptures have been seeking to call that out into the open so we can see it and make the great crossing into source life, which is our home, which is the call of our being, to be who we are, to awaken our primal self, our primary being, our primary self. So I'd like to focus on, in this meditation, on the passage from this smotherboard matrix, seeing that it's so challenging to making the shift into the higher integral Unum matrix of the source code, the missing source code. Why has that been so challenging? Why have we been so terrified with deep phobias and defense mechanisms and forms of denial and denial mechanisms to avoid it and to prevent it when it should be so attractive? So what I'd like to do in this meditation is go deeper into several of the very powerful themes we've opened up, which could lead us to be very in despair, skeptical, and not want to touch this. And I'd like to turn behind me to the matrix hologram that we've been using, a 3,000-year articulated matrix or hologram to show our human condition in a way we've never seen it before. Because we never called out the single brackets and never had the double brackets to really differentiate and deconflate the two levels of language and consciousness and reason and word power and mind power and culture-making codes. The codes were conflated in the same space. And we defaulted to the more familiar, what we're calling the single bracket mind operating process. That's a deep implant in us, and it's pre-conscious. It's not even that we're conscious of it. It's so deep. It's a pre-conscious technology that allowed us to really tap language and get information and begin to have meaning and to articulate a life and events and have a narrative and word power, an interpretation power, to have a worldview in our narrative space, and to develop our science and art and express our emotions, all in that space. So, again, I hope this is more familiar. We're using the double parentheses to mark out the fundamental source matrix of the field of reality or being. This is the space of being. Double brackets is a language, the deep language that we access when we cross from our familiar language into the deep. And so the double parentheses, the double brackets, is a source for the infinite space. The Logosophia, to use the Greek terms, the Logos, the space of reason, the space of mind, of word, of the light of knowledge, of meaning, of truth. It all comes out of the Logos. The deep logic, the code of logic is a code for being. So being and word and reality, all of these are in the same place in the Logos, Sophia. Sophia, the feminine embodiment of wisdom in our lives. Logosophia is the infinite field. And all of the great scriptures and Enlightenment teachings are trying to name this space from where we are here. Humanity is living here. And in tapping the amazing wealth of our great wisdom and enlightenment, first philosophy endowment of the planet, across the planet, over the last 3,000 years, we begin to see this picture emerge, what we didn't have before. The double bracket could not be seen. It was here. It was implanted in the only space we knew. And so this opening up of the hologram in meditative intelligence, meditative speaking, and remember, we're using the word meditation not as something that we do in our mind space. Meditation is coming into the source space. Meditation is speaking from the zone, speaking from the primal language, the code. And we've suggested in so many examples that Jesus, when he's speaking the code, I am the way, I am the truth, I am the life, to the others around him, the disciples who are in this mind space and word space. And that's where they read scripture, is here, in the space we're familiar with. And this is the word of source. And if Buddha is speaking from the enlightenment space and presenting the Four Noble Truths to the planet, to the people, to his listeners here, we've seen over and over that there's a deep translation problem to get the word of source, which is the deep language, the primal language, into the derivative language where everyday people, folks, bless us all, that's where we live, and that's a language we know, and that's a code we have, and that's how we read and interpret and make sense of everything that's presented to us in our space. And what's lost in translation is the medicine of source. When our great teachers, Krishna is speaking from here, the Om space, to Arjuna here, and Buddha is speaking from here to us, and Jesus is speaking, and Moses is at the burning bush and bringing the laws of God, of Yahweh here, to the people here, in the tribalized space, cut off from source. And so the great challenge, evolutionary, of the human journey to come home to source is to, first of all, know where we are. What language are we using? What code is dominating our culture and our lives? And all of our arts and sciences and experiences and worldviews and narratives are all going on in this space. We've seen. So how do we make this, how do we become aware of this, step back from being entrapped here in a way and make the great crossing into the awakened space? And that's where we saw there's a deep translation problem. We lose it both ways. When we try to understand that word and draw it down to us, we lose it. So moving on, how do we translate ourselves and our lives into the high place of yoga, of Buddha, of Jesus, of the laws of God, Moses, of Muhammad, of Allah? To surrender to Allah is here. So what I'd like to begin with in this meditation, this was just a warm-up again to remember. And I repeat it because it's so easy to just slip by. It's been slipping by humanity for over 2,500 years. So forgive me if I repeat it, because this is an attempt to open up a deeper space in a new way that we've not seen the double bracket space disentangled from the single bracket. We didn't have single brackets before. So single bracket, calling that matrix out of language and thought and life, that's where we're living, in the single bracket matrix, which is deep, and it's a deep implant that makes us able to have a culture and language and see and speech and reason. And all the language arts and culture arts that we have, that we can make from that matrix. It's deep and it's pervasive for all aspects of our cultural lives in that single bracket space. The single bracket was not called out and seen clearly. We needed the double bracket code, the deeper logic, the deeper source science in order to see the single brackets and call it, name it, and to have the double brackets as an alarm system for the code to resist the temptation to swallow it in the single bracket space. So what I'd like to start out with is why the optimism? Because what we've been showing here is that this matrix, our logic is here. A is A. There's a law in this code. A code is a law. And there's a law here. And the naive law of identity, A is A. We name a thing, one name, A is A. That's a law that governs the space. And when you do A is A, what we do is we have A and not A. Because if you purchase A by differentiating it from what is not A. So the law of identity differentiates, it polarizes, it separates. Identity diversity. It splits. Is, isn't. I, not I. And that keeps going in every aspect of that matrix. The matrix of identity. It's identity life, identity culture, identity thinking. It gives us pieces and units like Lego blocks. I'm a Lego block, right? Everything we name is given a name, and then we try to put those pieces together into a whole in this space, but it's synthetic. Whereas in this space, which we've seen, the unum pluribus, the infinite connection, is a continuum. Reality here in this language is a continuum that is so deep and interwoven that nothing can be broken out. Any word is woven into the entire fabric. We are woven into the fabric. So it's living, it's alive. Language here is alive. Language here are pieces, it's broken, it's atomized, it's fragmented by the matrix we're using, and we have pieces. And what we have in this box where we're living, the space, the screen of everyday consciousness, common sense is going on in this. Think of this as a screen of awareness that we are aware of our feelings, our outside events. So all of our life is being seen on the screen, and we, the viewer, the knower, the experiencer, the perceiver, is perceiving our experience and processing it with our language to picture the world and express and communicate in this language, single bracket language, which represents, whereas double bracket language here presents. The double bracket word is powerful. It's a different matrix, a different level of language, thought, experience, culture, phenomena, empirical. The world appears differently in the double bracket language space, where the word is the being, is reality, is God. If you want to bring God in, we don't have to. But we could just speak being and reality, which is the most powerful words we can use. Because if here we're cut off from a deeper access to reality, which is a continuum, an unum continuum, where all of the grand, boundless diversity is nevertheless unum woven together in the infinite interflow of an I and thou, woven together. That's double bracket word. The double bracket word is a deeper level of language and reason and thought and culture making, the code of double brackets. So when Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life, or John is saying in the beginning is the word, that's the word we're speaking of, the Logos. For example, the Om, the Tao, the Yahweh, the Allah, the Buddha nature, Buddha Dharma, the grand unified field of universe. If we want to use the language of science, questing the unified field, it's here, not here. So single bracket language is not the same as double bracket word, and that's what we're getting now. That's what the double bracket is a matrix for the living word of inconnectivity. You can't break things apart. They're all connected. The word and mind and experience and thought, all woven together. Space and time and mind and body and mind and word and world, and all connected with the field. So here we are more I and we centered. Here we are source centered. It's like going from the Ptolemy to the Copernicus in a way, that the earth is the center. No, the sun is the center. Here it is that we, our consciousness, is the center, and we have our experience showing up to us in a space that is, we don't realize is objectified. It's the object of thought and feeling and experience and emotions. When we see it on the screen, it's phenomena. And that really comes from the matrix that is governed by the law, A is A. And when we're playing that game, we polarize and divide. It's is or isn't, and everything is either or. And that matrix is huge. So what I suggested is that when you begin to get the double bracket medicine of source, medical ontology is a word for being. When you get the language, the medicine of being, and this is seen to be cut off, we saw why this matrix cuts us off from a direct access to who we are, to reality, to being. We have an indirect access here is where reality, our culture, our experience, our phenomena, events, facts, all show up here. All of our different worldviews, all of our different lenses of making and remaking and narrating. Our narratives are going on here. We humans have our narratives, and there are many different boundless cultural worlds and worldviews and perspectives and different paradigms. And we saw there's a huge, matrix is a code of codes. It has its own, the single bracket matrix can keep generating codes and different stories and different narratives and worldviews. And we could look at our different religions. There's Allah and Yahweh and Om and Brahman, Tao. We could do all of that here. And we can have the higher and the lower, because here's a created world, there's a higher world. There's a lot of wiggle room in this space. And that's what we've been doing for 2,500 years, let's say. If we say the language of God, oh, that's higher. And the language of persons here. And we draw a line across the middle. Let's do that. We can get higher and lower. I know this gets messy, but we could easily say, oh, that's a meta principle. Here we are here, the created world. Here's the transcendent world. Here's the space of God. That's the heaven space. This is where we are in the created world. We can do that here. But we're still here. That's the point I'm trying to bring out. And our great teachers were seeing that. We are in a deep implant in this space. That's a matrix. You can say we have a logic on many different logics here. A logic is a particular logos law that we're using. We could use the classical logic, mathematical logic, all different kinds of logics. And our great genius philosophers have been trying to get the logic here. But logistic, let's use the word logistic, is deeper than logic. Logistic is a mind operating process that shapes the entire space. The logistic. And what I've been suggesting is that when you look across 2,500 years and look at our culture, across the culture, science, art, every aspect of our culture, our political life, our economic life, our family life, our love life, our sex life, all our life, it's all going on in this logistic. And this logistic cuts us from source. So the reality we have here is a derivative reality. It's not primary reality. This is primary being, this is derivative being. And if science has a lens, it's using certain facts. As science evolves from Newton to Einstein and beyond, our facts change, our universe change. This is where our universe is showing up here within that space. So it's not the universe. It's not the double bracket universe at the ground floor of the infinite flow of reality. And so when our great geniuses are tapping this space, getting access out of this matrix into this space and seeing, but not naming the double bracket and trying to speak this truth to this culture, the medicine somehow gets lost because we downsize it and download it. And we've been seeing that the great call of our teachers is not to download, but to upscript. We have to upscript ourselves from an I-it. This is an I-it technology. Everything is an it. It's an object. It's objectified. And we saw last time, that's not good news. Because we make ourselves in this space. So unwittingly we objectify ourselves by becoming a being. I'm a being, and I'll tell you what my story is. I'll give you my CV, which is the information. So this is the information matrix. And information is powerful. It's a wonderful breakthrough in human evolution. But it also is disinformation here, because if I see myself here, and that's my information, then I'm not seeing myself in a deeper way. This is transinformation. So anything here, any X here, single bracket, when we see it in this space, it opens up in its being, in a deep, profound interconnection with the entire field of reality. Every X is X. That is a great law. Not A is A, but A is A. X, whatever it is, I am I. Now is now. Here is here. Time is time. Every word. We played with this about 3 meditations earlier. We're going from English to Zenglish, if you're speaking English. But French, German, Swahili, Hebrew, Russian, whatever has to learn Zenglish and speak it. It's when you upgrade Russian to Russian, Chinese to Chinese, Swahili to Swahili, Spanish to Spanish, the word to the word. That's the path of our maturation as a species. Because this matrix is I-it, and that's serious medicine, because what we saw in terms of ontological medicine, the medicine understood here, double bracket, deep ontology medicine, is that to be desourced is to suffer. To be desourced, here's source, here's desourced. This line means we're desourced because of the matrix implant that we haven't been seeing, because we live here, we don't step back. It takes a great moment to open back and see, oh, there's an implant governing our lives here. And so science, we point out, science is brilliant, how it's going on here, and all of the mathematics and the logics and the philosophies and narratives and theologies and cosmologies and breakthroughs in economics and politics and ethics, all of this is going on here. And what we're seeing by our great teachers through the ages, calling us to the ultimate breakthrough, to change your matrix. So that to be desourced, we saw it in source medicine, is a striking medical condition. Living under the influence of this single brackets motherboard and having a life here in the polarized space where our worlds are broken, our narratives are fragmented, our words, our mental states are fragmented, our own being is cut from ourselves. The me here is cut off from the me here. And we said at the end of the last meditation that the double bracket space is calling us at every moment. We can't step out. It's the infinite force. Gravity is not the greatest force. It's infinite being is the greatest force. And it's operating and calling at every moment, in every pulse, in every cell. And we feel it, and we don't know it. We don't have the language for it. Because the language we have is not an adequate matrix to understand the deeper matrix of being. The best we can get is a single bracket reality of different worlds, and we have different realities. As we change our worldview, we have different worldviews and different realities. So science gives us one, and religion gives us another, and our different religions give us different worldviews. And our cultures give us different worldviews. A culture is a living ontology that gives us what is real, the facts, what makes sense. And what makes sense in one culture or world doesn't make sense in another. So the facts of one are not the facts of the other. So that's what's going on here in the space. So that to be desourced is a disaster for our human condition, and that's what the suffering is, ontological suffering. We don't just mean hardships of, a hurricane just hit and we're suffering and we got flooded and people have diseases and they age prematurely and die, and poverty and famine and all of these fragmentation of nature in our environment. That's suffering, yes, but there's a deeper suffering which is ontological. When our being is broken, when we're separated from being, from reality, we suffer existential, ontological. And we don't have a language for that medicine, ontology. We're calling it medical ontology, source medicine, unum medicine. Because the missing science, when you get to source matrix, source science, it is the science of all sciences. It is the code of all codes. It's the culture of all cultures. That's the unum principle, the unum axiom. The unum axiom is so profound. That's what the double bracket is. It's being itself. It's the word itself, the infinite word which is being. And you could use God words for that. If you call it God, it's going to be God is goodness, God is love. God is infinite, God is omnipotent, God omniscient. All of those words of classical theology are attempts to get the language of being, which is the double bracket matrix. So to be desourced, to sum that up, to be desourced is to be cut off from being, and it creates deep anguish in our being. It's a gnawing. We used the last time meditation, we said the word squirm. We don't know what's wrong. Something is missing in my life. When we're living here and we've made ourselves objects, and we saw that that's a very profound medical condition, because when you objectify, which is what this matrix does, it makes everything into an entity, a thing, a being. And that may sound glamorous here, but it is really a disaster when seen from being itself. When we're here, when we're being here, which is the I am space, the mindful space, the awakened space, the deep science, when you are, your minding and your knowing and your being cannot be broken. They're all one. And I and other are one. This is I, thou, dialogue. This is monologue. We're in my mono space and it's broken apart. So we began to show last time that wide-ranging, when you look at the human cultural condition and all the broken, different, fragmented cultures and narratives and worldviews in our civic space, and our internal psychic life and the fragmentation we're feeling and experiencing and the polarization within myself and within our relationships and within our families and with our neighbors and with other cultures, other religions, other worlds. I mean, look at the human condition from the eyes of source medicine. We can see a wide-ranging, everywhere we look, we see dysfunction and pathology. ontological pathologies. Violence and all kinds of forms of objectification, racism, sexism, homophobia. We've gone through many of these, but not just those cultural, social, political breakdowns of violence, where you have Holocaust and genocide and ethnic cleansing, which is a clash of worlds and ideologies, which is what goes on here. This is ideology space, and they're broken, and they don't know how to come together. So it's a fragmenting, polarizing war zone. Culture here is a war zone. It's a culture war. It's a battle for presiding in this space. Who's got the truth? Whose narrative is the primary leading narrative? That's the number one narrative. Is it the Allah? Is it the Yahweh? Is it the Christ? Is it the yoga? Is it the science? Is it the Buddha? Which culture is going to rule in this as the truth? Because this is where meaning and truth happens for us. But this is a deeper meaning and truth. The Unam place is not a war zone. It's a meeting point of deep dialogue, connection, and flow. Non-violent. This is violent. This is non-violent. So whether we look at the range of human personal breakdowns in my life, I'm feeling an emptiness of meaning. I thought I had meaning in my life. I gave myself my major, and I have my profession, and it gave me meaning. And my religious practice, I'm doing my spiritual practices. I'm practicing yoga. I'm doing martial arts. I'm practicing feng shui, whatever it may be. I go to church, I go to synagogue, go to mosque, temple. Whatever it is that I'm doing that is giving me meaning, somehow something is missing. There is no way to avoid it. When we're living under the matrix of a single bracket matrix in this space, and we're objects and it and entities and broken like Lego pieces here and not logos units. A logos unit is infinitely connected. When I am here as a logos unit, that's my individuality, that's my true identity. My true ID is here. Here I have a broken ID in the box. And I know there's more to me than meets the I. The I that I'm narrating and constructing in the story, in this narrative space of my story, who I am, my ID here, is not the same as my ID when I'm in my primary being. And so we feel it. So everything in our lives in the single bracket cultural space is artificial, ultimately. It's not sustained by the source, even though the source is always sustaining us. We've seen that principle, that all of this could not happen without the source. This is not self-sustaining, but it's pretending that it is. When you say A is A, and unconsciously, that's a preconscious principle. When you're living by A is A, the presumption is that A is a unit on its own. And if I say I am, in the space that I exist on my own. I'm self-existent. The chair is self-existent. The tree is self-existent. Everything is you name it, it's self, allegedly. Whereas in fact, everything here is dependent on the source. It couldn't be. You could not use a single bracket matrix without the double bracket support system. So every A is A. It's the deeper law of the source matrix. A is A, rather than A is A. And those units that are artificially constructed in this book, when you're living like that, then human relations break down. You can't find love. You can't find intimacy. Marriage is getting hitched. It's not getting united in union, in communion. Our religious practice is not taking us into the space, the sacred space. We're seeking to do our religious practices here. We download scripture to where we understand the word of God, the word of source here in this space, and we're not getting the primary word. So our political life, our social life, our scientific life, everything, because science, the best we can do here within this matrix, and that is something that science has to look at. We as scientists, using and being used by a deep rational matrix and a code and a law that is shaping our scientific activity and our perceptions of the facts and of the universe, of the world, by biological phenomena, chemistry, digital, computer science, whatever the science may be. Are we under the sway of a matrix? Have we looked at that? And have we come to terms with there's a double bracket matrix that is the first primal deep word, the deep reason, the logos code here, reason? Could it be that reason here that language is artificially developed to this point, and we have to go to deeper reason here, to rational space. We as scientists, we want to get reality. We want to get to the deep facts. We want to get to the ground floor of being, of reality, of what is, of language, whatever it is. So we scientists have to ask, am I being used and using unwittingly a level of word and mind and rational development, cognitive development, that is causing fragmentation so that I can't find the unified field in that space? Even though I know there must be nature as a unified field, here's a unified field here. You need the double brackets to get it. But could my science be diminished and derivative? And that's the point of first science. First science, the science of all science, is saying being is first. The infinite being is first. And the grammar, the syntax, the DNA of infinite being is going to govern everything else that's derivative. This is derivative, this is primary. So insofar as our science is here, and our religion is here, and our politics is here, and our ethics is here in the space, and our practice of dialogue, and our practice of peacemaking and diplomacy, and the UN, and the United States of America, and the Soviet Union, which is all of those words, unity here is not union. Unum is union here. So when we say we're all one, you have to go to this place to get it, the axiom. This is where unum unity, infinite flow is here. So, given that picture last time, we're jumping off from this now, is what I'm trying to say is that can lead us to be in despair. Say, wow, is that really true? Are we living in the single bracket matrix? And we're objectifying each other, and we're cut off, and we're desourced. And that's really, another word for that is what in the biblical space is called sin, and in Eastern sacred ontology it's called samsara. Am I in samsara? Is that for real? Is samsara a matrix? Is sin a matrix? And we're born into it? Could that be? We don't have to go into that language, of course. We don't. We're being scientific. And unum science, first science, is science of being. It's pure logic. And that's the double bracket matrix. Right? So, and that's where all of our different first names for God and spiritual life and religious life is all coming out of that. But that's, and our scientific life too is trying to get to the ultimate first principles of first science. So it can be very demoralizing to face the picture of the human condition as being desourced and cut off within a matrix that's holding us captive and colonizing us. So we're not free range. Here we're caged here, and this is where we're free. So how do we go from being a cage to free range and a free human being? This is freedom, this is liberty, this is life, this is truth, this is meaning, this is ethics. All of this. Well-being. Well-being is here, ill-being is here. So that picture can be very demoralizing. I'm honoring that and I'm facing that, but I want to say, why did I end on an optimistic note at the end of the 25th prior meditation? And now in the 26th meditation, I'm trying to pick up on that and build on it and go deeper. And what I'm suggesting, why be optimistic? Because source science is helping us to see, I want to use the word user-friendly in this meditation, that the shift from this matrix, this motherboard, to the motherboard, the source matrix, it should be the happiest, gleeful, joyous, celebratory occasion imaginable for us humans. It's not something that we should be bummed about. It's something we should be elated about. Why? Because source science is giving us a deeper diagnostic of what was been wrong, and we haven't been able to name it. We haven't seen that this motherboard is causing us to live in a hellish life. And that wide-ranging pathologies, and we're going to go deeper and deeper to see that. How could it be that sexism and racism, homophobia and Holocaust and genocide and all of these socio-political, cultural disorders, and my anxiety and my depression and my addiction and my broken relationships at home and objectifying one another and the violence that breaks out in interpersonal relationships and the clash of our different cultural worlds and ideologies, all of those are connected? We're saying exactly yes. Unum science, medical ontology, is able to show that the single bracket matrix is generating the whole range of pathologies and dysfunctions across the board in our culture. Rational breakdowns, yes. Reason can be ill. Knowledge, epistemology, cognition, that can be broken and incoherent. Meaning, truth, facts, they can all be fragmented. Everything in our cultural life under the smotherboard is compromised and has a virus of this motherboard. Desourced. And when we're desourced, we can't fake it. We are ill-being. Our being is ill. When our being is ill, our culture is ill, our language, our narratives, our art forms, our sciences, brilliant as they are. Please, I'm not... I want to honor the magnificence of us humans and the great genius moments that we've had in the arts and the sciences and spirituality and politics and economics. Every field has genius because we're able to tap the source and the source taps us. Right? Everything we do, we're not doing it ourselves. We're not self-sustaining. We're being sustained by the ultimate force here. And it permeates us. So we can tap the zone, we can tap the source, and it taps us constantly. The infinite force, I call it living under the influence, LUI, is constantly in us and calling us to rise higher. Every move we make in our cultural evolution is being the call of the source. So we can tap it. We know that. We athletes and performers, zoners, when we say we're in the zone, it's not something I am doing. It's somehow when you step, we can slip outside of the single bracket matrix spontaneously in our high moments. That's when we're in the zone. We're flowing. We're in the flow. We're tapping the genius of the source. And it's boundless. And we have access to that. In our great architecture, brilliant music, our scientific breakthroughs, and evolution of deeper science to get into the unified field, our technologies, all tapping the zone, our music, performing art, great performances of actors, actresses, all of those great moments that we have, we human spiritual moments, great courage that we've seen, that's all tapping the zone. The zone can tap us. But when it happens here, when we get whammed by the zone, when the force is striking us here, and we open up spontaneously to this power, we then are pulled right back. After that peak moment, we go right back into the smotherboard. Because that dominance is a deeply entrenched habit. And to get out of it, we have to rehabilitate, to create a new habit, to break this matrix and to retool our lives with a source motherboard, the double bracket matrix, which we can now see. So one of the main points in this meditation, to give us courage and encouragement and morale and to feel elated, is that I'd like to point out that when you look back over the centuries, many of our great spiritual teachings and enlightenment teachers have, because they didn't fully have the single bracket, double bracket, and therefore could detect the real culprit. The real culprit is the smotherboard that cuts us off. When you say sin, smotherboard. Samsara, smotherboard. When you say human suffering, it's a smotherboard. And we can see that now, because before we were looking over here, but now we can step back and say, wait a minute, all of this is coming and being shaped by constraints of the single bracket matrix. And now with source science, and we could get a more clear diagnostic of what's wrong, what's been causing the suffering and the squirm of life, of existence that we feel, or we don't know how to name it or what's going on, but we know something is missing. Our being is missing. Myself is missing. My high life is missing. My freedom is missing. And we couldn't even articulate it clearly, even though our great teachers were calling us out to this for centuries. So the good news, the reason why we should be elated is if we're suffering and medically we couldn't diagnose it here, but we can step back and say, now check it out now. Now look at those. Look at the addiction. Look at the depression. Look at the fear of death. Look at the angst about surrounding death as a terminal life. My being is going to end. Right? Look at the failure of love and the failure of intimacy and the failure and the breakdown in our sexuality and our human relations and our family relations. And look at our culture and the civic space to see all of these disorders as being generated and housed in that space, and to get this out, call this out and move into, dilate into the higher matrix. Now that we can see that more clearly with a single bracket, double bracket technology brought out into the open, based upon all our great teachers and based upon source science, it's really basic science of the infinite being. This is all of these disclosures are coming out of the code of infinite being. That's unum science. And to call out now a clearer diagnostic should make us elated. Says, wow, there's hope. Because I know that I've been in a midlife crisis. I know something's been gnawing at me, and I've been trying to medicate it in different ways, and trying to fill the void with a compulsion for to be recognized, to have fame, to have money, to have more sexuality, whatever it is that I'm going to fill it with, the emptiness. I want more love. I want whatever it is. I want more, wealth, money, celebrity, whatever. Those are going to be false items that are not going to solve the medical problem, which is to come to being, to wealth, to freedom, to well-being, to happiness, to life and liberty. All of that's here. And if we don't have it, and we can't have it here, then and we're suffering, then we have a way to get out of the suffering. So, what I'd like to suggest in this meditation is there's good news. That's the note we ended at the end of the 25th meditation. There's reason to be elated now because we can really let it go. We can drop what our great teachers are calling us in effect to say. When Abraham had to let go of Isaac and make a sacrifice to put God first here, it's his attachment to this life that he had to sacrifice and be willing to sacrifice. When Jesus is saying, unless you die, you can't be born again, that sacrifice is let go of the sin's script, the sin matrix that cuts us off from source. Medically. You got to die to be born. Or when teachers are saying you've got to stop the desires, lose the ego. That's another one we hear. You got to let the ego die. That's scary. And that's not user-friendly. I'm trying to reframe the call to move from this ill being to well-being in a much more healthful, user-friendly, celebratory way where sacrifice isn't negative, it's joyous. To let go, sacrifice is letting go of the grip of the single bracket matrix, that we become aware of it. Now we can face it and say, I let this go. And when you do that, you don't give up your beloved family. You don't give up your sons and daughters. You don't give up your lover, your partner. You don't give up your house that you worked for. You don't give up your profession. We don't give up science. We don't give up Google, the technology of putting the planet together in a magnificent way, and cell phones. We don't give that up. We come to a different relationship with it. When we see it in the double bracket matrix, it's as a miracle, right? That's been granted to us by the source. When we see it all around us, in our children, in our homes, in nature, in our civic democracy, it's a miracle. Because in this space, everything is miraculous. Every point is a miracle, and all interwoven. And here, it's been cut. So the emptiness of a life crisis is all through your lives, K through 90. We're in a life crisis here because this is a crisis of life. This life is terminal. This life is boundless. Everyone wants to come to life. Everyone wants to stop the premature aging and the decay and the terminal death and the angst and the separation and the fragmentation, the loss of relationship and loss of love. Everyone wants to get out of that to come to the flowing of nirvana, of being. That's heavenly. And the good news is what I'm suggesting with source science is, and this is what our great teachers are calling us to. But the way it was being language could put us off because we're already terrified of crossing from single bracket matrix into the double bracket self in the first primary being, to face my primary being. It's scary enough as it is, but when I hear I've got to let the ego die or stop desiring, it sounds as if I'm going to squelch my body and my feelings and my psyche. And I'm not willing to do that. And in fact, you don't have to do that because desire here is not the issue, or the ego is not the issue. These are effects and side products of this motherboard. Egoing is what we do to ourselves when we're in the space. But if we didn't have this, our self would flourish. So losing the ego, almost like kill yourself, it sounds harsh and it's not the best way to word it. Right? To let go of this motherboard that's creating the ego, that's creating psychological attachments and desires and emotional life that's codependent and all of the pathologies that comes with broken relationships and trying to fix it. Right? When you let go of this motherboard, the cause of it medically, then all of those symptoms are left behind in the upgrade to a fulfilling life in the zone, which is our birthright. It's not for a few great yogis and mystics and Buddhas up in the mountains. It's for us living in the trenches of everyday life. And the point I'm making about changing the matrix from the single bracket, we have a choice. The choice we know is within this space. I'll either do this or that. I'll go this way or that. Right? We have a choice here. But the deeper choice is choosing this or this. Stepping back. That's Buddha's choice. Are we going to live here or are we going to live here? This is freedom. This is bondage. Your choice. Our choice. So that's deep choice. That's ontological choice. I mean, which matrix? How many of us realize, I got up this morning, I'm saying, you know what, I think I'm going to drop my single bracket matrix today. We don't do that. We don't even know that there's a matrix. We don't know that there's a choice. And even though Buddha has said it, and our great teachers have been calling us to make that change, double bracket change. Not change here. We can make changes here. I can change my story. I can change my paradigm. I can change my word. We can make changes. We saw. This is like an opioid, because in this place, it's a pre-addiction. It's not even an addiction. It's deeper than addiction. Our addictions flow from the dominance of this because we're cut off from being. But it's a pre-addiction implant that's holding us here. And all of the things that we want and desire in our psychology, or psychological life, and mental states are going on in this space. So the choice of letting go, of recognizing the single bracket matrix and rehabilitating our mind operating process, our logistic, right? We need to really see, I have a choice in what matrix dominates my life. Not dominates, but when I say not my will be done, but thy will be done, that is a metaphor for the higher will of the zone, of the source. Not my will. I have a will. I have a choice. But when you let go of this matrix that's cutting us off from ourselves and from life and from being and flow, that choice to rehabilitate, that's the pathway of yoga. Krishna, speaking here to Arjuna, is saying, use yoga technology to rehabilitate your mind from this to this. This is the Om script. This is yoga. Jesus, let go of this and come into the Christ. To believe in the Christ is to come into this Christ zone. And that's a very strong thing to say, that if you're a Christian in the single bracket matrix, could you be missing Christ? Because if Christ is the double bracket word, code, and to believe in the Christ is to enter the code, and to come home with Christ, to Christ as the code, the logos in the flesh, then we could be missing deep Christianity. Same for a Jew, same for a Muslim. If Allah and surrender to Allah is to surrender this code that makes me first, and I'm self-sustaining, the mythology here is that any item here is self-sustaining. It doesn't need the sustenance of the source, of the infinite being. And that's just bad ontology, because nothing can step outside of infinite being, and all is sustained by the infinite, which is infinite presence. So whatever, you don't have to use God talk. If you say, what is being? It's infinite presence. And what does that mean? It's infinite in every way. So is it infinitely conscious? Yes. So reality is infinite awareing? Yes. That's why when we say I am, we get closer. When we are awareing, mindful, heads up, zenning, we're tapping into the double bracket matrix. So the point of this meditation is to say it's user-friendly. We don't have to misdiagnose it and make it worse. It's hard enough to make the shift. It's terrifying to make the shift from one matrix to the other and to realize that's some choice. It's rehabilitating my very power of agency. My agency to be in the double bracket is amazing. That's real agency power. Agency means my choice, my call. But it's not an ego-based monocentric choice. It's an I-thou choice. That's why not my will, but thy will means thou will. I and thou. When my will is in sync, when I'm in flow with the law of the zone, of the source, then you're free. That's human liberation. That's rationality. That's a moral law, the honor code. And that's love. That's Buddha's compassion, Christ's love, agape. That's peace. That's nirvana. It's flow. It's beautiful music, harmonious, non-violent, deep dialogue, not monologue. It's the end of the suffering of war and violence. And we're saying that the single bracket matrix is violent because it objectifies. And when you objectify being, you make it an it. And when you make it an it, you objectify it, and that's where violence can come. The single bracket matrix breeds violence. When you treat yourself as an object and others as an object, it's not very far when the chips are down to going to genocide and holocausts and ethnic cleansing and violence and war and taking out the other and taking out nature or whatever it is that we objectify. Objectify our children, objectify our loved ones, objectify our neighbors. Right? Objectification is a form of violence, and it comes with the single bracket matrix. So there's no way to have peace in this space. If you're a peacemaker and you want to make peace here, then it's not going to happen because this is inherently violent. It's polarizing by its nature. You can't have democracy here. And that's a huge thing to say. If you want the United Nations, it's got to be here. If you want the United States of America, the United People, it's got to be in the unum pluribus. Unum pluribus, which is the motto in our founding constitution on the American scene. It's here. The unum pluribus means multiple in one. One nation under logos, under source, indivisible, with freedom and justice for all. That's here. So if we're living a culture, a civic space here, under the sway of a colonized, this is colonized, and this is free. So on the one hand, the diagnostic of our great teachers and scriptures and of our unum science now, we were trying to call out the double bracket unum science of all science, the medical ontology, the diagnostic can look pretty awful to say that our cultural life is pathological. When Krishnamurti, for example, said in effect that being well adjusted to a profoundly sick society is not a measure of health. To be well adjusted here to a profoundly ill, pathological society here is not a measure of health. And that's another observation of source medical diagnostic. So on the one hand, the deep ontology, medicine, the science of all science, in terms of the code of being, the Logos code, reveals to us, and supported by our great scriptures and teachers, Enlightenment teachers, that our human condition is pathological and dysfunctional, and we're suffering. And that we have a choice and we can end it. And to end it, we've got to let something go. What is that something? Well, my kids and my home and my wife and my possessions, I have to detach and give it up and give up myself and give up my desires and my psychology. No, that's not to get to the real. It's to give up the being captured by a single bracket matrix. That's a stage of our information development of language, word processing here, and mind processing and culture making and self-making here, and having our lives here, is being caused and dominated by this rather than the double bracket humanizing matrix. So what I'm suggesting is user-friendly. Is on the one hand, it looks pretty bad if we really have the courage to face our human condition is busted. Our democracy is busted. Our relations with ourselves, our inner life and psyche is fragmented in ways that we know is I'm not integral, I'm not whole, I want wholeness, I want to be one. That's why I'm doing the yoga, that's why I'm going to church or synagogue or mosque or whatever spirit. I'm desperately trying to find unity and peace in myself and well-being. We're all looking for that. But what we're seeing now is that as long as we're not facing and calling out the motherboard, we're not able to make the crossing. This is a huge point, is that our best efforts at diagnostic and life coaching and enlightenment teachings and best-selling books and all of that, great, right? It's wonderful to get information, to Google wisdom and to have the information, because our gifted teachers can tap this space and then translate it and bring it up into the culture, into the marketplace, and publish books and have webinars and seminars and talks that help coach the people here behind the wall. And what I'm suggesting as a game changer, and I would like everyone to ask herself, himself, and each other, and whatever spiritual practice or self-help practice you're in, Have your teachers or coaches called out the dominance of the single bracket matrix, as our great teachers are want to do, are pointing to, as a rite of passage to get into the higher space of our primary being for my personal and interpersonal flourishing? Have we? Are we? If not, then we are blocked and hitting the wall from inside here. So any activism, good as it is, if you're facing recycling, good. If you're facing global warming, good. If you're facing your human rights issues, great. It's important. But realize that human rights, to really get it, requires us individually and collectively to move into the place of human dignity and worth and flourishing and nonviolence here. So this really is a critique of everything that's going on in our culture as we know it now. If we have not called out this motherboard, then we're hitting the walls without realizing it, and self-defeating, self-sabotaging, and not medically, scientifically, really getting to the source of the issue, which is to see this motherboard, call it out, and move and rehabilitate ourselves into the I am mindful heads-up space of the living word. This is inert and dead, and this is living. Language is alive here. Language here are pieces. So the information technology, right, that puts it in the box and objectifies, is a kind of violence to the word. We're violating the word by chopping it up, as great as our single bracket technology of information has been. So the user-friendly point I'm making, that optimism, is that when just medical ethics, is that unless you diagnose the ailment accurately, you can't really heal it. And with source medicine, we can finally say, wow, no one ever showed us and me, each other, that there is a matrix that you're using that we can't deny. It's there. And it's controlling our language and our worldview and our perspectives and our narratives and our intelligence and our rationality and perceptions and experience. It's all going on there. And we can't see it because we're within it and we're seeing through it. It makes us see. But it blinds us to seeing the matrix in a deeper move. So we have to open a deeper double bracket lens to see this whole picture. This picture could not be seen without the double bracket unum, axiom, and lens of source code. When we have the source code, the I am code, because of wow, that's what Buddha was saying. That's what Jesus, that's Moses, that's Muhammad, that's Krishna, that's yoga. And I can see what science is doing. Science is beautiful. So what I'm suggesting then, to sum up this meditation, and we'll go deeper next time in number 27. I know it's taken time, but I think this is so important. This is a turning point for all of us. And we're in this together. And we need to all, each of us, look at this, find your own way to look at this. And however you do it, you may not want to use the single bracket, double bracket as your way to see the shift, but each of us needs to find a way to do that and come into the I am. And no one can do that for you. I can't, no one can. My mother and father, your mother and father can't say, honey, here is your code to the double brackets, to I am. Each person has to do that Arjuna struggle, for example, and find the way, oh, okay, I see it. I find my power, I found my agency to say I am. I found my password into source. And that's a good news. Because that's in us. That's the point of this hologram is saying, that the double bracket is within each of us, but it's been stultified and repressed and suppressed. And there are phobias and blockages and defense mechanisms because we're so attached to our narrative and our story, we can't imagine giving it up because it feels like a death. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to cut off my emotions and feelings and desires. I want eros. I want to be connected. I want pleasure. I want sexuality. I want joy and vibration, joie de vivre. Yes, and that's what I'm saying. That you're not giving up your profession, whatever it may be. You're going to gain it. You're an attorney, become an attorney. You're a physician, become a physician. You're a scientist, become a scientist. You're an artist, enter deeper art. You're a singer, sing from the source. Sing your heart out. That's soul music. It's from the source music. That's the origin of music. Whatever it is, don't give it up, gain it, is the point. That's the good news. So the prior teaching sounded as though you got to kill it and lose it and deny your body and deny your world and give up your house and give up your kids. And no, that's the faulty way of really getting to the science, which is you've got to let go of the dominance of the single bracket matrix, this motherboard. Call it out. See it clearly. Go back to the drawing board. Read Jesus again. Read the Gospels. Read Quran. Read the Dhammapada of Buddha. Read the Bhagavad Gita. Read the history of thought from Socrates and Plato and Aristotle all the way through to Locke, Berkeley, Hume, Descartes, Spinoza, Leibniz, Kant, Hegel, and into the 20th century. Read those philosophers. They're struggling with this. Read Kant, for example. Read Heidegger. Read Jean-Paul Sartre. Read Camus. Wittgenstein. These are great minds that are addressing these points if you can only see it in the double bracket missing unum science emerging. The LUI working, the double bracket calling our gifted artists and scientists to get the deeper laws here. And physics is really getting close to tapping the butterfly effect, the non-locality, superluminary, black holes, infinite density. It's almost flirting with this technology. It's almost opening up the astrophysics. It's beautiful what science is doing and where it's going. And the technologies have, which is a source, is gifting that all to us. The internet and the cell phones, all of that, MRIs, all the medicines, beautiful. So the basic concluding meditation here is to face the phobias of the shift in the matrix. That it can sound scary, and it is, and it's not easy, it's challenging. It's the greatest act you can perform is to go from single bracket to double bracket. And I'll flip the page in a moment and end on a visual. That's to remind us, we did it before, but I'll do it again in this meditation because hopefully you'll see, it's right here. The double bracket is already here in each of us. Each human is a logosapien. Each human is entitled to become a human fully in a mature, from an adolescent phase of our development to a full, mature person, of a dignified, powerful, noble, beautiful being that we are. We all are. And to end our suffering. That's the good news of this meditation. And the point I'm making then is that you, in a sense, you have to give up. By giving up the single bracket, you're giving up everything you've known and everything you've had. But the irony and the beautiful part is, but you gain everything. If your profession was here, your profession is here. If your ID was here, your ID is much deeper than you thought. To give up your false ID, your single bracket ID for your double bracket ID, wow. Because single bracket ID is an identity theft. We have a lot of that in the culture right now, identity theft. Your single bracket ID is not who you are. We are much more than any single bracket. In the double bracket space, when you find our true individuality. And that's when we blossom into the logosapiens that we are. All of us, it's equal opportunity. Enlightenment of rational awakening. Reason is a resource for all humans. And we're coded with it. And somehow what we've got to do from the collective science, the double bracket science, is saying, recognize the single bracket, see the pernicious effects of humanity for the last 3,000 years, and look at the devastation in our lives, recognize it. It's a living hell where we are in a way. We're living on the Titanic cultural space, and we need to go to Noah's Ark, which is the double bracket ark. And when you let go of your single bracket child, you gain your beautiful daughter and son here. If you let go of Isaac here, Isaac appears. And you let go of yourself here, you appear. And the father and the son, and the father and the daughter, and the husband and the wife, and the lovers, whomever you are here. You let go here and you end up with everything. And that's the good news. And I think it's important to have this meditation. Let's call this meditation 26 user-friendly. Shifting our matrix from a suffering matrix to a divine matrix, a human matrix, a double bracket matrix, from monologue to dialogue, from I-it to I-thou, from codependency to interdependency, from America to United States, from disunity to unity, a more perfect unum, a more perfect union. I'm using the case of the American culture as an example, everyone across the planet in whatever culture we're in, it applies to each of us in this birthright. Let me turn the page and end on this note. Because this picture can say, oh, this is here and that's over there. How do I go from here to there? And we've been suggesting a different picture all along. So let's end on this meditation. That wherever you are, here, the double bracket is right with you. Whatever you put there. So if you say I, this I, and this I, there's an identity crisis. The double bracket me and the single bracket me are right here, right now. The double bracket is not far away. It's in every breath and every moment. It's right with me now. So when you look at this picture, based upon everything we've done, all the 25 meditations, and we've seen this before, to change the matrix is not to give up yourself. It's to open up yourself, to do this, to step back from the dominance of this. It's not to throw out Google or to throw out your medical science and to throw out all of the great architecture and music and beautiful, everything we've got. No, it's not. It's to open it up. The greatest journey for a human is to go from here to here. And open this up. And what happens with that is that you don't throw out your computers. We don't throw out all of the technologies that we have, which have been gifted from the source. Because whatever goes on here could not happen without the double bracket source. The double bracket is making every breath possible. That's a principle of Unum source science, deep ontology. The infinite being is infinitely present in every moment. You can't push it away. That's basic baby science, deep ontology. And yet our single bracket matrix is blocking us from ourselves. So both sides of me are right here. This me and this me are right in the same space. So if I can get out of my way, so to step out of the being captured by the matrix and go free range from here to here, right? That's the greatest life coaching of our great Enlightenment teachers. You got to die to be born. But you're already there. You don't achieve enlightenment. Enlightenment is already with you. You have to get out of the way to allow it to show. That's yoga. That's Buddha. That's Jesus. That's Abraham and Moses. That's Muhammad. To surrender to Allah is to step out of the privileging your own matrix so that the Allah matrix can come. The infinite. So it's not that X has to become X. The evolutionary journey from here to there. When I use X, it means you plug in whatever you'd like. The pen here, the pen here. A society, say United States here, Russia here, India here, China here, whichever it is, the journey from the single bracket motherboard matrix to the double bracket, that journey is not a distance. It's right here already. So your high self, let's just use it again. The high self is already with you. And that's good news. So how do I get out of my way to stay and live and sustain my life in the zone? You need the source code. What's that? The language. Just like you learn any language we learn. When you get the rules of the language, you're able to sustain it. Now I know English, now I know French, now I know German. I know Spanish now. Why? Because the child has learned the rules of the game. And she knows how to speak Spanish. She knows how to use the syntax of the grammar and the laws of the language to now speak it on her own and make boundless sentences. That's a magic. Alchemy of language. In the single bracket space, when we learn English, for example, the laws of English allows me to speak English as a fluent, competent speaker of the language, whatever the language may be. But then when we go to the deeper power of the language, from single bracket English, if I go from English and open it up into Zenglish, as our words, whatever word we have, it has a deeper meaning. So whatever word we have, so it's the point of this illustration, this meditation, is that you don't have to go from here over there. It's right in the same place. It's right here. The two sides of yourself are right here now. And to step outside, that's enlightenment. That's the shift in the matrix. And that's the good news. The good news is that we all have access to our double bracket self. Our double bracket self is right with us right now, always. It cannot not be. It haunts us. It's right there. We tap it from time to time spontaneously when we can zone. But there's not a symmetric access. The double bracket has constant access to the single bracket space, but the single bracket is not reversible, does not have constant access to the double bracket, even though it's being held and sustained by the double brackets. And that's why we have to let go of the dominance of the single bracket to come into and rehabilitate our minds and our hearts and our brains into the I am. And that's when we're speaking the source language, the source code, Zenglish. It has its deeper laws where everything is interconnected and every word is interflow with every other word and every being is interbeing in the I-thou space. The I-thou matrix and language is a wonderful language. And when we learn to speak it, we can sustain it. And that's what our great teachers, come to the Christ, come to the Buddha, come to the yoga, come to the Om, come to the Tao, come to the Allah. When we get the Allah code, the love code, the compassion code, the ethics code, the reason code, the awakened code, the science code, the knowledge code, then we can sustain it. And that is the journey to source life. Thank you so much for staying with us in this 26th meditation on making it user-friendly and overcoming the fear of having to give up rather than gain. So I'm trying to change the language from a negative one of shut down desire, kill the ego, lose your family, detach. The language of detachment can sound unduly harsh, whereas I'm trying to switch it now scientifically from lose this motherboard and gain everything. Gain your true identity, gain your true profession. Let's do deep science. Let's become lovers. Whatever it is, let's dialogue. Let's have a democracy. Let's raise our children. They're sacred beings. Let's have a family life. That's double bracket. Let's honor each other. Let's be noble. That's what we're gaining. We're gaining everything. Let's celebrate nature. It's all sacred. So you're not giving up. You're giving up a technology that's adolescent and dysfunctional for one that is mature and liberating and well-being and the language of being. And that is what our great enlightenment teachers and wisdom teachers are calling out. So whatever practice you're doing, don't stop it. If you're doing yoga, if you have certain spiritual guides that you're using, or whatever practice you have that is giving you meaning, I'm not saying abandon. Don't give up Jesus, gain Jesus. Don't give up being a Jew, become a Jew. Don't give up Allah, gain Allah. Don't stop doing your Buddhist practice, become a Buddhist meditator. Do your yoga, whatever it is. Science is beautiful, become a scientist, sacred science. Open up the lens of the holoscopic mind, which is the ultimate technology of consciousness, the deepest source of all technologies. Scientists should love, I can enter the unified field. I can go into non-locality. I can enter the butterfly effect. I can live it. It's fractal. I can enter fractal space. My mathematics can go deeper. Everything we get better. That's the point of being user-friendly. That's why we should be ecstatic at the diagnostic of source medical ontology, because it can see more accurately what is causing the disruption and the fragmentation and the suffering. And medically, we can have the medical cure that's being generated by this motherboard. And we have a choice. We do have a power to change from the dominance of the single bracket matrix into the source matrix of Logos, Sophia, of reason. And that's when we mature in our journey as human beings, as Logos sapiens. So let's conclude this meditation. I know I've lost track of time, single bracket time, and I hope that this was timeless and timeful. I hope the meditation was in now time, which is no time at all. So again, what I'm seeking to share with you is a joy of of speaking the double bracket script, to speak it and perform it. And when you hear it and over in these meditations, it sinks in more and more, I hope, and gives you more power to say, okay, each person should be saying, I'm getting it. I'm going to look for my signs of my smotherboard and seeing how it's working and discover my power to call it out and step into me in a deeper way. And that is the greatest joy imaginable. So join us next time in meditation number 27 as we go more deeply into so many points that have opened up for us in these 26 meditations. So much to explore. Let's go into democracy and see how that works. Let's go into education. Let's go into our personal lives. Let's go into our love life. Go into family life. How do we raise our children? So many questions. How do you make peace? How do we have a United Nations? How do we have diplomacy? What is the art of peacemaking? What is liberal arts? Are the liberal arts fields connected in the zone, in the spirituality? What would education be like? Liberal arts, if there's a deep connection across our sciences and arts and disciplines. How do you be to be educated in double bracket liberal arts and literacy, in the art of dialogue, deep dialogue, the human art? We're dialogue sapiens. So there's so much more to go more deeply, so stay with me and please join us again. And thank you so much for staying with us.